The dust storm came without warning that September night in 1878, sweeping across the Kansas plains like the wrath of God himself. In the small town of Dust Hollow, shutters rattled against weathered frames and livestock huddled together in their pens, crying out against the howling wind. The church bell swayed in its tower, releasing phantom peals that echoed through empty streets. Grace Whitlow pressed her face against the cold window pane of the parsonage, watching the red dust swirl in violent eddies outside. At 19, she had grown accustomed to these storms, but tonight felt different. Perhaps it was the strange heaviness in the air, or the way her father had retired early to his study without evening prayers. Reverend Josiah Whitlow was a man of rigid routine, and any deviation unsettled her. "The Lord tests us with trials," her father often said, his austere face carved from the same unforgiving stone as the church altar. "And we must not be found wanting." Grace pulled her woolen shawl tighter around her shoulders. The parsonage was always cold, even in summer. Her mother's warmth had left with her spirit when fever took her 9 years ago, leaving behind only shadows and the faint scent of lavender in forgotten drawers. A sharp crack from outside made her jump. It sounded like splintering wood, coming from the direction of the barn. Grace waited, listening. Another sound, this time unmistakably the crash of something heavy falling. The horses were making distressed noises now, their whinnies barely audible above the storm. She glanced toward her father's study. No light showed beneath the door. He had taken his usual dose of laudanum for his headaches and would not wake until morning. Grace lit a kerosene lantern with trembling fingers and slipped on her mother's old boots, still kept by the back door after all these years. The wind nearly tore the door from her grasp as she stepped outside. Sand stung her face like tiny needles, and she had to shield the lantern flame with her body. The barn loomed ahead, its doors banging wildly in the wind. One hung at an odd angle. The top hinge had given way. Grace pushed inside, the sudden cessation of wind almost disorienting. The horses stamped nervously in their stalls, eyes rolling white in the lantern light. She murmured soothing words, checking each animal. All seemed well until she reached the last stall, which stood empty. The hay had been disturbed, scattered across the floor in chaotic patterns. A dark stain caught her eye. She knelt, bringing the lantern closer. Blood, fresh blood, still glistening wet in the golden light. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she followed the trail deeper into the barn, past the feed bins and toward the hay storage. There, half buried in loose straw, lay a man. Grace stifled a scream, nearly dropping the lantern. He was face down, unmoving, his dark coat torn and soaked with what could only be more blood. A revolver had fallen from his limp fingers, lying just beyond reach. Everything her father had taught her screamed to run, to alert the sheriff, to get away from this dangerous stranger. But her mother's voice, gentle and long silent, whispered something else. Compassion, grace, even the Good Samaritan helped a stranger. With shaking hands, she set the lantern on a barrel and gingerly touched the man's shoulder. He was warm, alive. She could see his back rising and falling with labored breaths. Gritting her teeth, she grasped his shoulders and turned him over. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 30, with several days' growth of beard shadowing a face that might have been handsome if not twisted in pain. Blood seeped from a wound in his side, staining his white shirt crimson. His eyes remained closed, dark lashes stark against pale skin. Grace's mind raced. The blood was flowing steadily. He would die without help, but bringing a stranger, clearly a gunman, into town would cause an uproar. Her father would be scandalized. The congregation would whisper, and if this man was wanted by the law. Another memory surfaced, her mother teaching her to clean and dress wounds, preparing poultices from herbs grown in their small garden. "A preacher's wife must be ready for anything," she'd said with her quiet smile. "The Lord works through our hands." Grace made her decision. She grabbed old horse blankets from a trunk and fashioned a crude bed in the corner of the barn, hidden behind bales of hay. The man groaned when she dragged him onto it, but didn't wake, working quickly. She tore strips from a clean feed sack and pressed them against the wound. The bleeding slowed, but didn't stop. She would need her mother's medicine box, hidden in the root cellar where her father wouldn't think to look. He disapproved of female foolishness, preferring prayer to poultices. But Grace had secretly maintained her mother's herb garden, drawn to the earthy wisdom of healing plants. The storm still raged as she made several trips between house and barn, gathering supplies, clean water, her mother's carved wooden box filled with dried herbs and tinctures, more cloth for bandages. She worked by instinct and fated memory, cleaning the wound, a bullet hole. She realized with a shudder, and packing it with a paste of comfrey and calendula. The man stirred as she wrapped the final bandage, his eyes fluttering open. They were gray, like storm clouds, and filled with confusion that quickly sharpened to alertness. His hand moved toward where his gun had been. "Don't move," Grace whispered urgently. "You'll start bleeding again." He stared at her, taking in her plain dress, her prayer-pinned hair, the barn around them. "Where?" His voice was hoarse, barely audible. "My father's barn. You're hurt. I found you in the hay." Understanding dawned in those gray eyes, followed swiftly by wariness. "Your father? Is the town reverend?" "He's asleep. No one knows you're here." She hesitated, then added, "Yet." The man tried to sit up, grimaced, and fell back. "I need to. Can't stay. You can't go anywhere. You've lost too much blood." Grace surprised herself with the firmness in her voice. "What's your name?" He watched her for a long moment, clearly weighing his options. Finally, "Eli Deacon." The name meant nothing to her, but the way he said it, like a confession, sent a chill down her spine. This was no drifter caught in a storm. This was a man running from something, or someone. "Well, Mr. Deacon," she said, trying to sound braver than she felt. "You'll need to stay hidden until you're healed enough to travel. No one comes to this part of the barn except me. I'll bring food and check your wound, but you must stay quiet if my father finds you." She didn't need to finish. They both understood the implications. A young unmarried woman harboring a wounded gunman. The scandal would destroy her father's ministry, her own reputation, everything. Eli's eyes searched hers. "Why are you helping me?" Grace didn't have an answer, not one that made sense. Anyway, she gathered her supplies, suddenly aware of how improper this all was. Alone with a strange man in the middle of the night. "I'll return in the morning," she said, not meeting his gaze. "Try to rest." As she turned to leave, his voice stopped her. "Miss," she looked back. "Thank you." 2 simple words, but they held a weight that settled in her chest like a stone. Grace nodded and fled into the storm, her lantern a small point of light against the wild darkness. Behind her in the barn, hidden among hay and shadows, lay a secret that would either destroy her careful, constrained life, or finally set her free. The wind howled its prophecies, and Grace Whitlow, the preacher's daughter, had taken her first step toward damnation, or salvation, in the lawless heart of the frontier. Sometimes they looked exactly the same. Dawn came slowly to Dust Hollow, painting the sky in shades of ash and amber. Grace had barely slept, her mind churning with images of blood and gray eyes. She dressed carefully, pinning her hair with more severity than usual, as if propriety could armor her against what she'd done. Her father was already at the breakfast table, reading his worn Bible. "You're late," he said without looking up. "The hens need feeding." "Yes, Father." She moved mechanically through her morning tasks, gathering eggs, her hands trembling only slightly. Every sound from the barn's direction made her heart skip. "Storm damage?" her father asked when she returned. "The barn door. A hinge broke." She kept her voice steady. "I'll ask Mr. Morrison to repair it." Her father nodded, satisfied. Grace escaped to the kitchen, packing scraps of bread and salt pork into her apron pockets. Her father would be visiting the widow Harper this morning. She'd had another spell. Grace would have at least 2 hours. She waited until his buggy disappeared down the dusty road before hurrying to the barn. Morning light filtered through gaps in the walls, illuminating motes of dust and hay. The horses nickered softly, but Grace's attention fixed on the corner where she'd hidden her patient. Eli Deacon was awake, propped against the wall, his revolver back in his hand and pointed at the barn door. When he saw her, the gun lowered slightly but didn't disappear. "Easy," Grace said, showing her empty hands. "It's just me. Forgive my caution, miss." His voice was stronger than last night, but pain still etched lines around his mouth. "In my experience, kindness often comes with a price. The only price I ask is that you don't shoot me." She knelt beside him, noting with relief that the bandages showed no fresh blood. "I need to check your wound." He watched her warily as she approached. This close, she could see details missed in darkness. A thin scar across his left eyebrow, the way his dark hair curled slightly at his collar, the careful intelligence in those storm-gray eyes. His clothes, though travel-worn and blood-stained, were of good quality, not typical outlaw attire. "You're not from around here," she observed, gently peeling back the bandage. "Is anyone?" He sucked in a breath as she probed the wound. "Towns like this collect drifters like tumbleweeds. You don't strike me as a drifter." The wound looked better, no sign of infection yet. She applied fresh herbs and began rewrapping it. "And you don't strike me as the type to harbor fugitives." Grace's hands stilled. "Are you a fugitive?" Eli studied her for a long moment. "Would it matter if I said no?" "It would matter if you lied." A ghost of a smile crossed his features. "Honest as a preacher's daughter. Yes, Miss Whitlow, Grace Whitlow. Miss Whitlow, yes, I'm wanted by the law. There was a bank robbery 3 days ago in Cedar Ridge. Things went badly." Grace resumed her bandaging, trying to keep her voice neutral. "Did you rob the bank?" "I was there. I held a gun, by most accounts. That makes me guilty." He shifted, wincing. "But when they started shooting at a kid who got in the way, a boy no more than 10, I made a choice. Got him clear, got myself shot for the trouble. And your associates?" "Gone, with the money and without a backward glance." Bitterness crept into his tone. "Honor among thieves is about as real as fairy tales." Grace tied off the bandage and sat back on her heels. She should feel afraid, sitting here with a confessed criminal. Instead, she felt curious. "Why did you save the boy?" Eli's jaw tightened. "Maybe because I remember being 10. Maybe because I'm tired of only looking out for myself. Or maybe I just made a stupid decision in the heat of the moment. I don't think saving a child is ever stupid." "You would say that?" But his tone held no mockery. "What about you? Why risk everything for a stranger?" Grace looked at her hands, still stained with his blood despite scrubbing. "My mother used to say that Grace isn't just my name. It's what we're called to show others, even when it's hard, especially then. Your mother sounds like a wise woman." "She was." Grace stood, brushing hay from her skirt. "I brought food." She unwrapped the bread and pork, watching him eat with careful movements. Despite his circumstances, his manners were refined, another puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. "You weren't always an outlaw," she said. Eli paused mid-chew. "What makes you say that?" "The way you hold yourself, your speech. You've had education, proper upbringing." "Regular detective, aren't you?" He set down the bread. "My father owned a ranch in Nebraska. Good land, good life. Then the railroad came through. Wanted our valley? When we wouldn't sell, they found other ways to take it, legal ways, with bought judges and forged documents." Grace knew such stories. The growing West was full of them. "Your family, dead. Father shot defending our home. Mother died of grief 2 months later. My sister..." He stopped, jaw clenching. "Fever took her while I was in jail on trumped-up charges. By the time I got out, everything was gone. So you turned to robbing banks. I turned to surviving." His eyes met hers, defiant. "I take from the institutions that took from me. Never from regular folk. Never more than they can afford to lose. It's not noble, but it's what I know. Grace heard footsteps outside and froze. Eli's gun appeared in his hand as if by magic. She held her breath, but the steps passed by, just Sam Morrison checking his stored grain. "You need to hide better," she whispered once the danger passed. "I'll make a proper space behind those hay bales, where no one would think to look." Together, though Eli could barely stand, they fashioned a hidden alcove. Grace dragged in more blankets, created a small gap for air, arranged the bales to look undisturbed. By the time they finished, both were breathing hard. "You're taking a terrible risk," Eli said, leaning heavily against the wall. "I know." Grace helped him settle into the new hiding spot. "But I won't turn you out to die. Your father must never know." The thought of her father's reaction made her stomach clench. "He's unforgiving about certain things, about most things. And if I'm discovered, it won't just be my neck in a noose." Grace met his gaze steadily. "Then we make sure you're not discovered. You heal, you leave, and this never happened." Simple as that. "It has to be." Eli caught her hand as she turned to go. His touch sent an unexpected jolt through her. Warm, calloused fingers gentle against her wrist. "Grace, thank you. Again." She pulled away, disturbed by her reaction. "I'll come back tonight with proper supplies. Stay hidden, stay quiet. I'm good at both." As she left the barn, Grace caught sight of herself in the old mirror by the door. Same plain dress, same severe hairstyle, but something in her eyes looked different. Older, perhaps, or just more awake. The day stretched ahead, prayers, household duties, teaching Sunday school children their letters. All of it felt suddenly foreign, as if she were playing a role in someone else's life. In the barn waited a secret that could destroy everything she'd known. But as Grace walked back to the house, she realized with a start that the thought didn't frighten her as much as it should. For the first time in years, since her mother died, she felt truly alive. The risk, the danger, the sheer impropriety of it all made her blood sing in a way that all her father's sermons never had. She was harboring an outlaw, a thief, a man who lived by the gun, and God help her, she was already counting the hours until she could return to him. The church bell tolled the hour, calling the faithful to their daily devotions. Grace Whitlow answered, as she always did, but her thoughts remained in the barn, with gray eyes and careful hands and stories of loss that echoed her own hidden griefs. The preacher's daughter had indeed taken her first steps toward damnation. The strangest part was how much like salvation it felt. Sunday morning arrived with copper clouds and the promise of more dust. Grace stood before the congregation in her best blue dress, leading the hymn with a voice that betrayed nothing of her secret. Her father's sermon thundered from the pulpit, warnings of wickedness creeping into their righteous community, of wolves among the sheep. "The devil walks among us," Reverend Whitlow declared, his hawk eyes scanning the packed pews. "Even now, evil men lurk in shadows, waiting to corrupt the innocent. We must be vigilant." Grace kept her hands folded, her expression serene, while her heart hammered against her ribs. Behind her father, the cross loomed large, and she found herself unable to meet its wooden gaze. After service, the congregation gathered outside, women clustering like hens while men discussed the news that had finally reached Dust Hollow, the Cedar Ridge Bank robbery. $3,000 stolen, a child nearly killed in the crossfire, one robber shot, possibly dead, but his body never found. "Sheriff McKenna's organizing a search party," announced Jacob Sullivan. "The blacksmith says the wounded one couldn't have gone far, probably holed up somewhere between here and Cedar Ridge. Or right here in town," added Thomas Clayton. "Who ran the general store? Man like that could be hiding anywhere. Barns, sheds, even someone's root cellar." Grace forced herself to pour lemonade with steady hands, while the women speculated about what kind of monster would rob banks and endanger children. Mrs. Morrison, wife of the man who'd checked his grain yesterday, leaned in conspiratorially. "I heard tell the wounded robber was young. Handsome, even. The devil often wears a pleasing face to tempt the righteous. Indeed, agreed Mrs. Clayton. Why, a girl could be fooled by such a man, led astray before she knew her danger. Their eyes turned to Grace, who had remained notably silent. What do you think, dear? Mrs. Morrison asked. You must be frightened. A young woman like you with criminals about. I trust in the Lord's protection, Grace replied, the words ash in her mouth, and in my father's guidance. Such a good girl. Mrs. Clayton patted her arm. Though you're looking a bit peaked, dear. Are you feeling well? Before Grace could answer, her father's hand fell heavy on her shoulder. Grace has been working too hard. Early mornings in the barn, tending the animals. I've told her she needs more rest. The women clucked sympathetically and moved on to other gossip. Her father's fingers tightened briefly, a warning before releasing her. He knew nothing, she told herself. He couldn't. That afternoon, Sheriff McKenna himself came to call, a tall man with a sun-weathered skin and sharp blue eyes. He sat in their parlor like a hawk among doves. Grace served coffee with trembling hands. I appreciate your hospitality, Reverend, the sheriff said. I'm visiting every household, checking barns and outbuildings. That wounded robber has to be somewhere. Of course, her father agreed. Grace, show the sheriff to the barn. I trust you'll find everything in order. The walk across the yard felt like approaching the gallows. Grace's mind raced. Had she left any sign? Blood drops? Disturbed hay? The hidden space was good. But would it fool a lawman's eye? Sheriff McKenna searched methodically, checking each stall, peering into corners. When he reached the hay storage, Grace's heart nearly stopped. He stood mere feet from Eli's hiding spot, studying the arranged bales. You stacked these yourself, miss? I help when needed. Her voice sounded thin to her own ears. He moved one bale slightly, peered behind it. Grace bit her tongue to keep from crying out, but the sheriff simply nodded and moved on. The hiding spot held. Noticed your door needs fixing, he said as they headed out. Storm damage? Yes, sir, Mr. Morrison promised to repair it. Good. Can't be too careful with broken doors. Never know what might slip in. His eyes lingered on her face. You'd tell me if you'd seen anything unusual. Wouldn't you, Miss Whitlow? Of course. He tipped his hat and left, but Grace felt his suspicion like a weight between her shoulders. That night, she waited until the house was silent before creeping to the barn. She found Eli alert, gun drawn, sweat beading his forehead despite the cool air. Sheriff? He asked tersely. Gone, but he'll be back. The whole town's looking for you. Eli sagged against the wall. I should leave. Tonight. I've brought enough trouble. You can barely stand. Grace checked his wound, disturbed to find it hot to touch. And you have a fever starting. If you try to ride now, you'll be dead before dawn. Better than bringing ruin to you. Let me worry about that. She applied a cooling poultice, trying not to notice the way his muscles tensed under her touch. Tell me about the robbery, the truth. As she worked, Eli spoke in low tones about the gang he'd fallen in with. Desperate men who'd started with noble intentions but grew harder with each theft. The Cedar Ridge job was supposed to be bloodless, but Frank Dalton, the leader, had grown reckless, violent. When I saw that boy freeze in the street, saw Frank raising his gun. Eli shook his head. I knew I was done. Grabbed the kid, took a bullet for my trouble. Last thing I remember was stealing a horse and riding hard. Until you collapsed in my barn. Your father's barn, he corrected. How is it a preacher comes to have such a fine daughter skilled in healing? Grace felt heat rise in her cheeks. My mother taught me. She said healing hands were God's gifts, not devil's work as some claim. Some like your father? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. He's hard on you, Eli observed. It wasn't a question. He's a man of conviction. Grace finished with the bandage. He sees the world in absolutes, good and evil, saved and damned, no room for gray. And you? She met his eyes. I used to think the same. Now. She gestured vaguely at their situation. Now I'm harboring a criminal in direct defiance of everything I've been taught. Regrets? Grace considered. I should have them. I should be horrified at myself, but mostly I feel alive. Like I've been sleepwalking for years and suddenly woken up. Danger has that effect, Eli said softly. Makes everything sharper, clearer. Is that why you chose this life? Partly. Also had limited options after losing everything. He caught her hand before she could pull away. But you have a life here. Reputation, future. Don't throw it away for what? Christian charity? For me. His thumb traced her knuckles, sending sparks up her arm. I'm no good. Grace, even if I wasn't wanted by the law, I'm not the kind of man who could court a preacher's daughter. She yanked her hand free, suddenly angry. Did I ask you to court me? Did I give any indication that I expected anything beyond basic human decency? No. He looked genuinely chagrined. I apologize. You're risking so much. That's my choice to make. Grace gathered her supplies. Not yours, not my father's, mine. As she reached the door, Eli called softly. Grace, what did you mean, sleepwalking for years? She paused, not turning. Since my mother died, I've done everything expected. Perfect daughter, perfect Christian. Never questioned, never complained. But sometimes, late at night, I wonder if this is living or just existing. And now she harbored an outlaw. Now she'd lied to everyone. Now she felt more herself than she had in 9 years. Now I'm awake, she whispered, and fled into the darkness. The week that followed tested every ounce of Grace's newfound courage. The search parties intensified. Sheriff McKenna returned twice more, each time watching her more closely. Her father grew suspicious of her distraction, her frequent trips to the barn, the way she startled at sudden noises, and through it all, her connection to Eli deepened. Their late-night conversations ranged from books — he was surprisingly well-read — to dreams they'd abandoned. He told her about wanting to study law before his life crumbled. She admitted to writing poetry, hidden in her mother's old Bible where her father would never look. Read me one, he asked one night as she changed his bandage. They're silly, amateur scribblings. Please. By lantern light, she read verses about prairie winds and caged birds, about rivers running toward unknown seas. When she finished, Eli was quiet so long she feared she'd embarrassed herself. You have a gift, he finally said. Those words, they're about being trapped, aren't they? Grace nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Then fly, he said simply. Whatever happens after I leave, promise me, find a way to fly. But even as they grew closer, danger pressed in. The town's paranoia reached fever pitch when someone reported seeing a stranger near the old mine. Then came the night Grace returned to find Eli delirious with fever, his wound showing the angry red streaks of infection. She knew with cold certainty he would die without proper medicine. Medicine she couldn't get without questions, unless— Where are you going at this hour? Her father demanded as she put on her cloak. Mrs. Harper is poorly again. She sent her boy Jimmy to ask for my help. The lie came smooth as silk. Her father waved dismissal. Returning to his sermon preparation, Grace slipped out into the night, her mother's medicine box under her cloak, praying forgiveness for what she was about to do. The fever had taken hold of Eli like prairie fire, consuming him from within. Grace found him thrashing in delirium, his skin burning beneath her palm, the wound angry and swollen despite her careful tending. His gray eyes, when they opened, saw through her to some distant horror. Sarah, he mumbled, reaching out. Sarah, I'm sorry, couldn't save you. The fever. I tried. Grace's heart clenched. His sister. She caught his searching hand, whispering soothing words that seemed to calm him, but she knew herbs and poultices wouldn't be enough now. The infection had spread too deep. Working through the night, she bathed him with cool water, forced willow bark tea between his lips when he was lucid enough to swallow. She used the last of her mother's precious golden seal, packed the wound with honey, anything to fight the poison in his blood. The barn grew cold as the hours passed. and she wrapped herself in a horse blanket, refusing to leave his side. "Don't you die on me, Eli Deacon," she whispered fiercely. "Not after everything. Not now." Dawn was breaking when his fever finally broke, leaving him weak but clear-eyed. He found Grace asleep sitting up, her hand still clasping his, her head pillowed on the edge of his makeshift bed. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and pieces of hay tangled in her usually pristine hair. He watched her sleep, struck by the fierce protectiveness in her face even in repose. This proper preacher's daughter had become a warrior for him, fighting death itself through the long night. The tenderness that welled up in him was more dangerous than any fever. Grace stirred, her brown eyes fluttering open. Relief flooded her features when she saw him awake, aware. "You're back," she breathed. "Thanks to you." His voice was hoarse. "How long?" "All night. The fever was bad. Eli, I thought—" She shook her head, unable to finish. "You should have let me go. Would have been easier for everyone." "Stop that." She checked his forehead, satisfied to find it cool. "I don't abandon people, She caught herself, color rising in her cheeks. "People under my care." He caught her hand before she could pull away. "Grace, what were you going to say?" "Nothing. You're still weak. You need rest." "I've been resting. Now I need truth." His thumb traced patterns on her wrist. "We've been dancing around this since the beginning." "There's nothing to dance around. You'll heal and leave, and I'll go back to my life. That's how this ends." "Is it?" He struggled to sit up, Grace immediately moving to help him. The movement brought them close, faces inches apart. "Is that what you want?" "What I want doesn't matter. It's the only thing that matters." His free hand rose to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. "Grace, She pulled away, standing abruptly. "Don't, please. This is hard enough without complications." "Complications," he laughed bitterly. "Is that what we're calling it? What else can we call it? You're an outlaw. I'm a preacher's daughter. I know. You think I haven't told myself that 1,000 times?" He leaned back against the wall, exhausted but determined. "You think I don't know I'm poison to you, that caring about me could ruin everything you have? Then why are we having this conversation? Because I'm selfish. Because when you look at me, you don't see a criminal. You see a man. Because for the first time in years, I want to be better than I am." Grace wrapped her arms around herself, trembling. "I can't feel this way. It's wrong." "Why? Because your father says so? Because the town would gossip?" He pushed harder, sensing her wavering. "Or because you've been taught that wanting something for yourself is sin?" "All of those things. None of them." She paced the small space. "I don't know anymore. When I'm with you, everything I thought I knew seems less certain." "That's not wrong. Grace, that's living." She whirled on him. "Living? I'm lying to everyone, sneaking around like a thief, risking my father's reputation, his ministry. His reputation, his ministry. What about yours? What about what you want?" "I want—" She stopped, chest heaving. "Say it. I want to stop being afraid." The words burst out of her. "I want to write poetry without hiding it. I want to heal people without apologizing. I want to make choices without checking first to see if they're righteous enough. I want—" "What?" he asked softly. "What do you want? Grace?" She met his eyes, and something inside her finally broke free. "You! God help me! I want you!" The confession hung between them like morning mist. Then Eli held out his hand, and after a heartbeat's hesitation, she took it. He drew her down beside him, moving carefully with his injury. "I have nothing to offer you," he said quietly. "No home, no future, no promises of safety. Only a wanted man who'd try every day to be worthy of you." "I'm not asking for promises." "Then what are you asking for?" Grace studied their joined hands, his sun-dark and scarred, hers pale and soft. Such different worlds they came from. Just this, now, truth between us, even if it can't last. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her palm. The gesture sent fire through her veins. "Grace Whitlow, you are the bravest woman I've ever known." "I don't feel brave." I feel terrified. Good. Means it matters. He shifted closer, wincing slightly. May I? Would you let me? She understood what he was asking. Her mother's voice whispered warnings. Her father's sermons thundered condemnation. But louder than both was her own heart, beating wild as a caged bird suddenly seeing sky. Yes, she breathed. His kiss was gentle, careful, nothing like she'd imagined outlaws would kiss. His lips were soft, patient, asking rather than taking. She responded instinctively, her hands rising to tangle in his hair. The world narrowed to this, warmth and tenderness and a sweetness she'd never dreamed existed. When they parted, both were breathing hard. Grace touched her lips, wonder in her eyes. Is it always like that? No. Eli's voice was rough. Never like that. A sound outside made them spring apart. Grace scrambled to her feet, smoothing her dress with shaking hands. But it was only Sam Morrison's dog, barking at shadows. I should go, she said. Father will wake soon. Grace, tonight. I'll come back tonight. She gathered her supplies, not meeting his eyes. At the door, she paused. Eli, that was my first kiss. I know, he said softly. I could tell. Was it? Did I? It was perfect. You're perfect. She fled before he could see her tears. The sunrise painted Dust Hollow in shades of gold and rose, but Grace barely noticed. Everything had changed. The careful boundaries of her world had shattered with that kiss, leaving her raw and new and absolutely terrified. At breakfast, her father commented on her distraction. You seem troubled. Daughter, is it about these bandits? You needn't fear. The wicked always meet justice in the end. Yes, Father, she murmured, thinking of gray eyes and gentle hands. That day passed in a haze. Grace taught Sunday school, visited the sick, helped prepare for the church social, all while her lips remembered pressure and warmth. When night finally came, she could barely contain her eagerness. But as she approached the barn, she heard voices. Her blood froze. Searched everywhere else, Sheriff McKenna was saying. This barn's been checked, but maybe we missed something. Happy to help, her father replied. Grace has been tending things here. She'd have noticed anything unusual. They were coming. In moments. They'd find Eli. Everything would be over. Without thinking, Grace ran to the back entrance, slipping inside. Eli was already alert, gun in hand, face grim. They're coming, she gasped. Sheriff and Father, you have to... No time. He struggled to his feet. Help me. Together they stumbled toward the ladder to the hayloft. Eli climbed with Grace, pushing from below, both knowing it was futile. He was too weak, the space too exposed. The barn door opened, lantern light spilling in. Wait here, Grace whispered, and did the only thing she could think of. She screamed. Both men came running to find her by an overturned barrel, cradling her ankle. Snake, she gasped. It went that way. I twisted my foot, jumping back. In the confusion that followed, her father fussing, the sheriff searching for the snake. Eli managed to conceal himself deeper in the loft. The search was cursory after that. Both men focused on getting Grace to the house. You're lucky, the sheriff said as her father wrapped her ankle. Could have been a rattler. The Lord protects the righteous, her father intoned. Grace nodded, playing the shaken daughter perfectly. But inside, she marveled at how easily deception came now. How natural it felt to protect what had become precious to her. Later, much later, she crept back to find Eli where she'd left him. Close call, he said. Too close. You can't stay here much longer. I know. He pulled her close, and she went willingly into his arms. But not tonight. Give me tonight. There in the hayloft, surrounded by sweet hay and shadows, Grace Whitlow fell completely. Not into sin, as her father would name it, but into something that felt holy in its own way. They talked until dawn, sharing stories and dreams, stealing kisses that grew bolder with each passing hour. When the roosters crowed, Grace knew everything had changed irrevocably. She was no longer the obedient daughter, the perfect Christian. She was a woman who'd chosen love over safety, truth over righteousness, and despite the danger pressing in from all sides, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. The October wind howled across the Kansas plains like a living thing, rattling windows and stripping the last leaves from cottonwood trees. Grace stood at her bedroom window, watching dust devils dance in the distance. 3 weeks had passed since that night in the hayloft. 3 weeks of stolen moments and growing desperate to be together. Eli was healing well, too well. Soon he'd have no excuse to stay, and they both knew it. The thought made her chest tight with panic she couldn't voice. "Grace!" Her father's sharp call broke her reverie. "Where have you put my sermon notes?" She found him in his study, rifling through papers with increasing agitation. "They're on your desk. Father, under the Bible." He snatched them up, then fixed her with a penetrating stare. "You've been distracted lately, absent-minded. Are you ill?" "No, Father, just tired. From your late nights tending the barn." His tone held suspicion. "Mrs. Morrison mentioned seeing lantern light there past midnight, multiple times." Grace kept her expression neutral through long practice. "The mare has been restless. I've been checking on her." He turned back to his papers. "See that you get proper rest. I won't have people saying I work my daughter too hard." Always appearances, Grace thought bitterly. Never concerned for her, only for what others might think. That evening, she found Eli standing by the barn door, testing his strength. He could move freely now, the wound reduced to a healing scar. Her heart sank even as she admired the restored grace of his movements. "You're better," she said unnecessarily. "Thanks to you." He turned, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. "We need to talk about what comes next." "I know." She moved into his arms, resting her head against his chest. "How much longer?" "A few days, maybe a week. The search has moved on to other towns." His hand stroked her back. "Grace, come with me." She pulled back to stare at him. "What?" "Come with me. When I leave, don't stay here. We could go to California or Oregon, somewhere far from wanted posters and preacher fathers. Start fresh." The temptation was overwhelming. To simply disappear into the vast frontier, become someone new. But reality crashed back. "Eli, I can't just vanish. My father, the scandal. Would it be worse than the scandal if they found out about us now?" She had no answer for that. He cupped her face, thumbs stroking her cheeks. "I know I'm asking too much. A life on the run is no life for you. But Grace, I can't imagine leaving without you. These weeks, you've made me remember who I used to be, who I could be again." "You could stay," she whispered. "Give yourself up. With testimony about saving the boy, you might hang a little less quickly." He shook his head. "That's not a chance I can take. Not when I finally found something worth living for." Their kiss was desperate, full of impending loss. When they parted, Grace was trembling. "I need time to think." "I know." He led her to their usual spot, now cozy with pilfered blankets and hidden treasures. Her poetry, his few possessions, the remnants of their improvised world. "Whatever you decide, these have been the best weeks of my life." They sat close, sharing warmth against the cold night. Grace had brought food and medical supplies, but also something else, a small leather journal. "What's this?" Eli asked as she handed it to him. "My mother's diary. I've never shown anyone." She opened it carefully. She wrote about meeting my father, about their early years. Listen, Josiah was so different then, passionate about helping people, about building something good in this harsh land. He smiled more, laughed. The frontier hadn't made him hard yet. Eli was quiet, understanding what she was sharing. What changed him? Loss, disappointment. The weight of trying to save everyone's soul. Grace traced her mother's words. She wrote, "I fear we're losing ourselves to this place. The constant judgment, the rigid rules. I see Josiah becoming someone I don't recognize, and I wonder if love is enough to bridge who we were and who we're becoming." But she stayed. Yes, out of duty. Faith, Love. I don't know. Maybe all three. Grace closed the diary. Sometimes I wonder if she was happy with that choice. Are you trying to talk yourself into staying or leaving? I don't know, she admitted. I just know that my mother had dreams once, too, and she let them die. They sat in silence, listening to coyotes calling in the distance. Then Eli spoke, his voice rough. I won't be another chain binding you. Grace, if you stay, it has to be your choice, not because I'm pulling you away. And if I go, what then? Then we face whatever comes together. He kissed her forehead. But you'd be giving up everything you've known. Your reputation would be ruined. You could never come back. Maybe that's what I want, to never come back. The words hung between them, heavy with possibility. Grace thought of her life here, the endless prayers, the watchful eyes, the suffocating propriety. Then she thought of open sky and unknown horizons, of waking beside this man who saw her truly. There's something else, Eli said quietly. I haven't been fully honest about the robbery. Grace's heart stuttered. What do you mean? The money, some of it ended up with me, not by plan, in the chaos. I grabbed what I could, thinking to return it later. But then I was shot, running. He pulled out a leather pouch, heavy with coin. About $500, enough to start new somewhere, if we're careful. Stolen money? Yes, I won't lie to you about that. His jaw tightened. I could leave it here. Let your father find it for the church. Or we could use it to build something better than what it came from. Grace stared at the pouch. Blood money, her father would call it, but also freedom, possibility, a future. I don't know what's right anymore, she whispered. Neither do I, but I know what feels true. He set the pouch aside, took her hands. You, Grace, you feel true. Outside, storm clouds gathered, promising another violent night. The barn creaked and swayed, their sanctuary suddenly feeling fragile. Grace made a decision that had been building for weeks. Show me, she said softly. Show me what it would be like, us. Understanding dawned in his eyes. Grace, I need to know. Before I decide, I need to know all of it. She moved closer, hands shaking but determined. Please. What followed was gentle as summer rain, careful as prayer. In the circle of lantern light, surrounded by sweet hay and shadow, Grace discovered mysteries her mother had never explained, truths her father's sermons never touched. Eli's hands were reverent, his touch a worship that had nothing to do with churches and everything to do with the sacred space between two souls. Later, wrapped in blankets and each other, Grace felt transformed, not ruined, as her father would rage, but finally, fully herself. The woman in Eli's arms bore little resemblance to the girl who'd found him bleeding 5 weeks ago. No regrets? Eli asked, pressing kisses to her hair. None. She traced patterns on his chest, marveling at the freedom to touch him. Is it always like this? No, he said, echoing his words from their first kiss. This is something else entirely. This is what poets write about and most people never find. Then why does the world call it sin? Because the world fears what it can't control. He tilted her face up. And nothing about this, about us, fits into their neat little boxes. Thunder rumbled overhead, and the first fat raindrops began to fall. Grace knew she should return to the house, but couldn't make herself move. Here in their improvised Eden, tomorrow felt very far away. I'll go with you, she said suddenly. When you leave, I'll go. Eli went very still. You're sure? I'm sure I can't stay here. I'm sure I can't pretend to be who I was before. I'm sure that whatever waits out there has to be better than slowly dying inside while speaking words I no longer believe. She sat up, decision crystallizing. Yeah, I'm sure. He pulled her back down, kissing her deeply. Then we leave in 3 days. I'll get horses, supplies. You'll need to pack light, only essentials. My mother's journal, her medicine box. That's all I really need. And money. Take what you can without raising suspicion. They planned in whispers as rain drummed on the roof, routes to avoid sheriffs, towns where they might find work, the new names they'd take: Martha and James Henderson, a young married couple heading west, the lie that would become their truth. When Grace finally returned to the house, dawn was breaking. She moved like a ghost through familiar rooms, already seeing them as memory. Her father slept on, unaware that his daughter had crossed a line from which there was no return. In her room, Grace opened her mother's journal one more time. On the last page, in shaking script written days before the fever took her, were words that seemed prophetic. "I pray Grace finds the courage I lacked. May she choose love over duty, truth over safety. May she fly free." "I will, Mama," Grace whispered to the empty room. "I promise, I will." The morning started like any other, with Grace preparing breakfast while her father reviewed his sermon notes, but something in his manner made her nervous. The way he watched her, sharp as a hawk eyeing prey. "Sit, Grace," he commanded when she brought his coffee. "We need to speak." Her heart hammered as she took her seat. "Yes, Father." "Mrs. Morrison came to me yesterday. She's noticed things, disturbing things." His pale eyes bored into hers. "Apparently, you've been seen entering the barn at ungodly hours. Multiple times. I explained about the mare." "Lies." The word cracked like a whip. "I checked. The mare is fine. Has been fine." He leaned forward. "What have you been doing, daughter?" Grace forced herself to meet his gaze. "Nothing improper. Sometimes I just need solitude to pray." "In the barn, at midnight." He stood abruptly, looming over her. "I've been patient, Grace, trusting, but your behavior lately, the distraction, the deception, it speaks of corruption, of sin taking root. Father, please." "I'm moving your things to the root cellar tonight. You'll sleep there until this, whatever this is, passes. And tomorrow, I'm searching every inch of that barn myself." Grace's blood turned to ice. The root cellar, locked from outside, no windows. If he imprisoned her there, she'd never escape. And Eli? "That's unnecessary," she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I'll prove there's nothing." "You'll prove nothing. You'll obey." He gripped her shoulders, fingers digging in. "I've been too lenient since your mother died, given you too much freedom. That ends now." She nodded meekly, mind racing. Tonight. They had to leave tonight. The day crawled by in agony. Grace went through her duties mechanically, all while planning. She secreted away food, coins from the household money, her few treasures. During the church lady's afternoon visit, she excused herself with a headache and slipped to the barn. Eli took one look at her face and reached for his gun. "What's wrong?" "My father knows something. He's going to search the barn tomorrow, and tonight he's locking me in the root cellar." The words tumbled out. "We have to leave, now." "It's still daylight. Too risky. More risky to wait." She pressed close, desperate. "Please, if he locks me up, it's over. Everything's over." He held her tight, thinking fast. "All right. Can you get the horses without being seen? The church social is tonight. Everyone will attend, including Father. If I claim illness, do it. I'll gather what we need here. We'll meet at the old oak past the cemetery at dusk." They kissed urgently, both aware this could be goodbye if anything went wrong. Grace returned to the house to find her father waiting, suspicion etched in every line of his face. "Feeling better?" "No, actually, my head is pounding. I don't think I can manage the social." His eyes narrowed. "Convenient. You'll attend regardless. The congregation expects to see you. Father, I'm truly unwell." "Enough." He slammed his hand on the table. "You'll dress appropriately and accompany me, or I'll drag you there myself. Perhaps public worship will cure whatever ails your spirit." Grace recognized defeat. She nodded, a new plan forming. She'd go to the social, but find a way to slip out during the festivities. It would be harder, more dangerous, but what choice did she have? The church was packed, warm bodies pressed close in the small space. Grace played her part, helping serve food, making pleasant conversation, all while her nerves screamed. Her father watched her constantly, as did several of the town gossips. Finally, opportunity came when little Tommy Morrison fell and split his lip. In the chaos of crying child and fussing mother, Grace volunteered to fetch bandages from the parsonage. Her father, deep in theological debate with Deacon Williams, waived permission. She ran, not to the house, but to the barn. Eli was ready, their meager belongings packed. He'd already saddled her father's mare and his own recovered mount. "Took you long enough," he said, but his relief was evident. "Help me change." She'd hidden riding clothes, an old pair of her father's trousers and a work shirt. As she transformed from preacher's daughter to frontier traveler, she felt the last chains falling away. They led the horses out quietly. Using the back path, the church social continued, laughter and hymn singing drifting on the wind. Grace looked back once at the life she was leaving, the parsonage where she'd grown up, the church where she'd been baptized, the cemetery where her mother lay. "Regrets?" Eli asked softly. "No, just saying goodbye." They were nearly to the oak when hoofbeats thundered behind them. Grace's heart seized as Sheriff McKenna appeared, rifle aimed. "Hold it right there. Deacon, Miss Whitlow." Eli moved to shield Grace, hand hovering near his gun. "Sheriff, no need for trouble." "Bit late for that, isn't it?" McKenna's eyes were sad but determined. "Your father noticed you missing. Miss sent me to check. Found quite the scene in that barn. Bloodstains, hidden supplies. Doesn't take much to figure out. Please." Grace stepped forward. "He was hurt, dying. I couldn't—" "I know what you did, and why, I reckon." The sheriff's gaze softened slightly. "But the law's the law. Deacon's wanted for robbery, and you, miss, harboring a fugitive is serious business." "Then arrest me too," Grace said firmly. "I'm as guilty as he is." "Grace, no," Eli started. "Yes." She moved to stand beside him, taking his hand. "Whatever happens, we face it together." Sheriff McKenna studied them for a long moment. Behind him, more riders appeared, her father among them, his face a mask of rage and betrayal. "Grace," Reverend Whitlow dismounted, striding forward. "Get away from that criminal immediately." "No." I said no, Father." Grace's voice rang clear. "I love him. I'm leaving with him." The slap came hard and fast, snapping her head to the side. Eli surged forward, but McKenna's rifle stopped him. "You dare?" Her father's voice shook. "You dare speak of love with this serpent who corrupted you?" Grace touched her stinging cheek, tasting blood where her teeth had cut her lip. "He didn't corrupt me. He freed me." Blasphemy. Her father turned to McKenna. "Arrest them both. She's clearly been bewitched, led astray. Time in jail might restore her senses." "Reverend," McKenna said carefully, "your daughter's committed no crime worth jailing. Foolishness, maybe, but she's harbored a criminal, lied to the law. Out of Christian charity." A new voice interjected. Old Doc Hayworth pushed through the gathered crowd, which last I checked wasn't illegal. Others had followed from the social, drawn by commotion. Grace saw faces she'd known all her life, some disgusted, others sympathetic. Mrs. Morrison looked scandalized, but Martha Stewart, who'd lost her own daughter to harsh judgment, met Grace's eyes with understanding. "This isn't about law," her father snarled. "It's about righteousness, purity. She's thrown away everything for a thief and murderer." "I'm no murderer," Eli said quietly. "Thief, yes, but I've killed no one. You've killed my daughter's soul." "Father, stop." Grace's voice cut through his tirade. "My soul is my own, as is my choice." She reached into her pocket, pulling out her mother's journal. "Mother wrote about love, about choosing between duty and truth. She chose duty, stayed silent, died slowly inside. I won't make the same mistake." Her father's face went white. "How dare you invoke your mother? How dare you speak for her?" Grace's composure finally cracked. You buried her dreams along with her body, turned her memory into another tool for control. But I remember her laughing. Father, do you? I remember when she danced, when she sang songs that weren't hymns, before you crushed all the joy out of her with your rigid righteousness. The crowd murmured, shocked by this public airing of private grief. Reverend Whitlow stood frozen, momentarily speechless. Sheriff McKenna cleared his throat. Here's what's going to happen. Deacon, you're coming with me. Miss Whitlow, you're going home with your father. Tomorrow, with cooler heads? No, Grace interrupted. If you arrest him, you arrest me. I'll testify to that in court. I harbored him knowingly, willingly, fed him, tended his wounds, hid him from the law. She looked at Eli. I loved him, love him, that's my testimony. Grace, Eli said brokenly, don't do this. It's done. She faced McKenna. So what's it to be? Sheriff, take us both or neither. The moment stretched taut. Then her father spoke, voice cold as winter stone. Take them. If she wants to throw her life away for this criminal, let her. I have no daughter. The words should have hurt. Instead, Grace felt only relief. The last chain broke. Sheriff McKenna sighed heavily. Eli Deacon, you're under arrest for bank robbery. Miss Whitlow, you're free to go. But if you insist on this foolishness, I insist, then you're under arrest for aiding a fugitive. He looked genuinely sorry. Both of you, surrender your weapons. As the cold iron closed around her wrists, Grace felt paradoxically free. She'd chosen, not the easy path or the righteous one by her father's definition, but the true one, the one her heart demanded. They were led away to shocked whispers and her father's stony silence. But as they rode toward the jail, Eli beside her despite everything, Grace found herself thinking of her mother's last words in the journal. May she fly free? She had even caged. She was finally, truly free. The dust-hollow jail was a squat building of rough stone and iron bars, cold even in daylight. Grace sat on the narrow cot in the women's cell, separated from Eli by a wall but able to hear his voice through the bars. Sheriff McKenna had shown them what kindness he could, clean blankets, decent food, and privacy from curious townspeople. You shouldn't have done it. Eli's voice drifted through the wall for the 100th time. Should have let me go alone. We've been through this, Grace replied, pressing her hand against the cold stone between them. I made my choice. Your father is no longer my concern. The words still stung, but less than she'd expected. Tell me more about California, about the orange groves you mentioned. She heard him shift, probably leaning against their shared wall. Miles of trees heavy with fruit, air so sweet it makes you dizzy. Mountains in the distance, an ocean to the west, a place where nobody knows your past, only your present. It sounds like paradise. Could be. With you. It could be. The front door creaked open. Grace expected Sheriff McKenna, but instead heard a familiar voice that made her stomach clench. Mrs. Adelaide Morrison, chief gossip and her father's strongest supporter. I've come to visit the fallen woman, she announced primly. McKenna's response was dry. She has a name, Adelaide. Not in polite company. She doesn't. Footsteps approached Grace's cell. Mrs. Morrison appeared, dressed in funeral black as if already mourning Grace's virtue. Well, look at you. Grace remained seated, meeting the older woman's gaze steadily. Mrs. Morrison, don't you dare speak to me as if nothing's changed. Her voice dripped venom. Your poor father is destroyed, absolutely destroyed. The shame you've brought upon him, upon our entire congregation, is my burden to bear, not yours. Insolent girl. Mrs. Morrison gripped the bars. I came here to tell you what your selfishness has wrought. Your father's resigned his position, effective immediately. Says he cannot preach righteousness when his own household harbored such sin. The church is in chaos. Grace felt a pang of guilt, but pushed it down. Father's choice, like mine, is his own. Choice, You call destroying a good man's life a choice. I call living my own life a choice. Yes, before Mrs. Morrison could respond, more visitors arrived. Grace's heart jumped seeing Martha Stewart and, surprisingly, Doc Hayworth. They waited until Mrs. Morrison huffed away in disgust. "Grace, dear," Martha said softly. "How are you holding up?" "Better than expected." Grace moved to the bars, touched by their presence. "You shouldn't be here. People will talk." Doc Hayworth snorted. "At my age, let them. I've brought some medical supplies for your young man. Sheriff says he'll allow me to check that wound." While the doctor tended Eli, Martha pressed a small bundle through the bars. "Your mother's Bible. I thought you might want it. Found it in the church after your father left." Grace clutched the worn leather, throat tight. Inside, she knew, were her hidden poems. "Thank you. There's something else." Martha glanced around, then leaned closer. "Samuel Pritchard came through town this morning. He's a rancher from up north, has dealings in Cedar Ridge. He says there's talk about the robbery, about how one of the gang turned on the others to save a child. Says folks there aren't as eager to see that particular robber hang." Hope bloomed in Grace's chest. "Truly." "Can't say more than that, but thought you should know." Martha squeezed her hand through the bars. "Your mother would be proud. Grace, choosing love over fear. That takes courage she always wished she'd had." They left as more visitors arrived, a steady stream throughout the day. Some came to gawk or condemn, others to offer quiet support. By evening, Grace was exhausted, but strangely heartened. Not everyone in Dust Hollow saw her choice as damnation. Sheriff McKenna brought supper, lingering to talk. "Circuit judge arrives next week. You'll both stand trial then." "What will happen?" Grace asked. "Hard to say. Eli's looking at prison time. Certainly, maybe 5 years if the judge is lenient, considering the circumstances with the boy. You," he shrugged. "Probably a fine and stern warning. Judge Garrett's not harsh on women, especially those acting from misguided compassion." "Not misguided," Grace said firmly. "And I'll take the same sentence as Eli, or none at all." McKenna shook his head. "You're determined to hang yourself alongside him, aren't you?" "I'm determined to stand by my choices." That night, unable to sleep, Grace and Eli talked through the wall. She read him her poems by lamplight, voice soft in the darkness. He told her stories of his travels, places he'd seen, dreams deferred but not destroyed. 5 years, Eli said during a lull. "Could you wait 5 years?" "I'd wait 50. "Don't say that. You're young, beautiful. You could start fresh somewhere, find someone worthy." "I've found him. He's just temporarily behind bars." She heard him laugh, then grow serious. What if there was another way? Before he could explain, commotion erupted outside. Horses, voices, the door banging open. Sheriff McKenna's voice rose in protest, then was overridden by another, deep, commanding, familiar. A man appeared before Grace's cell, and she gasped. He was older, weathered by sun and years, but the resemblance to Eli was unmistakable. "Miss Whitlow," the stranger said, tipping his hat. "Name's Thomas Deacon. I believe you've been caring for my wayward brother." "Thomas!" Eli's voice cracked through the wall. "What the hell are you doing here?" "Saving your worthless hide, as usual." Thomas turned to McKenna. "Sheriff, I'm here to post bail and take responsibility for my brother. I own the Double D Ranch up in Wyoming Territory. Respected citizen, if I say so myself. Bail's not been set? Then let's wake the judge and set it." Thomas pulled out a leather wallet, heavy with bills. "I've also brought sworn statements from Cedar Ridge about the incident. Seems several witnesses saw my brother risk his life saving the Baker boy. The child's own father wants to testify on Eli's behalf." Grace watched McKenna wrestle with procedure versus practicality. Thomas Deacon pressed on. "I'm prepared to guarantee my brother's appearance at trial. More than that, I'm offering him employment and supervision at my ranch. Been trying to get him to come work for me since..." His voice softened. Since we lost everything. You survived? Eli sounded stunned. They told me you were dead. Nearly was, but that's a story for later. Thomas focused on McKenna. What's it going to be? Sheriff, I've ridden 2 days straight to get here. McKenna sighed deeply. Judge Garrett's at the hotel. If he agrees to set bail, he will. Thomas's confidence was absolute. And the young lady? Is charged with aiding a fugitive. Out of Christian charity, I hear tending wounds, offering shelter. Thomas smiled slightly. Sounds like she'd make a fine ranch nurse. My wife's been saying we need one. What with all the hands getting injured, I'd be willing to vouch for her as well. Offer employment. Grace's head spun. Events were moving too fast. Through the wall, she heard Eli arguing with his brother in low, urgent tones. Within an hour, Judge Garrett arrived, grumpy but surprisingly reasonable. He set bail at $200 for Eli, $50 for Grace. Thomas paid both without blinking. As the cell doors opened, Grace felt dreamlike. She stepped out to find Eli already free, the brothers facing each other with wary hope. Then Thomas noticed her, and his stern face gentled. So you're the woman who saved my brother's life and lost everything for it. I lost nothing I valued. Sir, no wonder he loves you. Thomas offered his arm. Come, we've rooms at the hotel. Tomorrow we'll sort out the rest. They emerged into cool night air. A small crowd had gathered, including her father. He stood rigid as granite, eyes cold as winter grave. Grace. Just her name, but weighted with finality. She met his gaze without flinching. Father, if you leave now, you are dead to me. No daughter of mine would choose this. Degradation. Grace felt Eli tense beside her, but she touched his arm gently. Then, I suppose I'm no longer your daughter. Goodbye, Father. She turned away, each step lighter than the last. Behind them, Reverend Whitlow stood alone, wrapped in righteousness that offered no warmth against the prairie wind. At the hotel, Thomas secured adjoining rooms. We'll talk properly in the morning, he said. For now, rest. You're safe. Safe. The word felt foreign after weeks of fear and hiding. In her room, Grace sat on the first real bed she'd seen since this all began. Overwhelmed. A soft knock. Grace, may I come in? She opened the door to find Eli, clean-shaven and wearing fresh clothes his brother had brought. He looked younger, closer to the man he might have been without tragedy. I can't believe you're here, she said, that any of this is real. He pulled her close, and she breathed him in, no longer hiding in shadows but standing in lamplight. Thomas wants us to come to Wyoming, start fresh at his ranch. He says... Eli pulled back to meet her eyes. He says if we're going to be together anyway, might as well make it legal. Avoid more scandal. Grace's breath caught. Is that a proposal? The worst one in history. He cupped her face. You deserve better. Flowers and poetry and proper courtship. Not a jailhouse engagement to a reformed outlaw. Reformed. If you'll have me, Thomas is right. I've been running from ghosts too long. Time to try building something instead of tearing down. Grace kissed him, pouring all her answer into the touch. When they parted, both were smiling through tears. Is that a yes? That's a yes to all of it. Wyoming, the ranch, you, especially you. They talked until dawn, planning a future neither had dared imagine. In the morning, they'd face trials, literal and figurative. There would be consequences for their choices. Bridges burned that could never be rebuilt. But for now, Grace Whitlow, soon to be Grace Deacon, sat with the man she'd saved and who'd saved her in return. Outside, the prairie wind sang of possibilities, of trails leading away from judgment toward something that might be redemption, or at least freedom to find out. A year later, the Colorado frontier stretched endless beneath December skies. Snow dusted the peaks like sugar on her mother's tea cakes. A memory from another lifetime. Grace Deacon, for that was her name now, pulled her wool coat tighter as she walked from the little schoolhouse, books clutched against her chest. The town of Pine Ridge was nothing like Dust Hollow. Here, people minded their own business, too busy surviving to judge their neighbors' pasts. The one-room school where she taught served ranchers' children, miners' daughters, anyone eager to learn. They called her Mrs. Deacon and never asked why a woman so young wore a wedding ring but lived alone during the week. Mrs. Deacon. Young Sally Morrison, no relation to her former tormentors, ran up with bright eyes. "Will you tell us more about the poetry lady tomorrow?" "Emily Dickinson, of course, dear." Grace smiled, remembering how she'd once hidden her own poems. Now she taught them openly, encouraging her students to find their own voices. She watched Sally skip away, then continued toward her small cabin at the town's edge. The dwelling was modest, but hers, bought with her teaching wages and what remained of Eli's savings after the trial. The judge had been lenient. As Thomas predicted, Eli served 3 months for the robbery. Grace paid a fine. They'd married the day he was released, in a simple ceremony with Thomas and his wife as witnesses. But marriage didn't mean togetherness. Not yet. Eli worked his brother's ranch 3 days' ride north, earning honest wages, rebuilding his life piece by piece. They saw each other once a month when weather permitted, stolen weekends that made the separation bearable. Grace built her fire and settled in to correct papers when she heard it, hoofbeats on the frozen ground. Her heart leaped as it always did, hoping irrationally he'd come early. But Eli wasn't due for 2 weeks yet. She peered through frost-etched glass and gasped. A lone rider approached through swirling snow, hunched against the wind, even bundled in winter gear. She knew that frame, that way of sitting a horse. Grace flew out the door, not bothering with her coat. "Eli!" He swung down from the saddle, catching her as she launched herself into his arms. His kiss tasted of winter and journey's end. "What are you doing here?" she asked when they broke apart. "Not that I'm complaining, but I'm done." His gray eyes shone. 3 months early, but Thomas said I'd earned it. Clean slate, debt paid. He pulled a leather pouch from his coat. "Honest money, Grace. Enough to start properly." She led him inside. Questions tumbling over each other. He shed his snow-crusted coat, revealing clothes that were worn but clean. Respectable. The gun belt was gone. He'd given it up after the trial, swearing never to live by violence again. "I've been thinking," he said as she poured hot coffee. "This separation, it's killing me. I know we plan to wait until spring, but..." "But what?" "Thomas offered me land, a section of his ranch to homestead. It's rough country. Would take work to make it profitable, but it's ours if we want it." He took her hands. "Or we could stay here. You love teaching. I could find work, maybe at the mill or..." "Eli?" She stopped his nervous rambling. "Where you go, I go. That was the promise. Teaching means something to you. I've seen your letters, how you write about those children." "I won't take that away." Grace was quiet, thinking. A year ago, she'd known nothing beyond Dust Hollow's confines. Now she'd discovered gifts she never knew she possessed. But she'd also learned something else. Home wasn't a place, but a person. "There are children on ranches too," she said finally. "Children who need learning just as much, maybe more, being so isolated." "You'd do that? Leave this for Uncertain Frontier?" "I left everything for Uncertain Frontier once before," she reminded him. "It worked out rather well." He kissed her again, deeper this time, a year's worth of longing in the touch. When they parted, both were breathless. "There's one more thing," Eli said. "Letter came to Thomas's place, from Dust Hollow." Grace tensed. "My father. Doc Hayworth. Thought you should know. Your father left town 2 months ago. Went east to some theological seminary. The church called a new minister, younger man with modern ideas." He pulled out the letter. "Doc says folks speak of you now with more kindness than condemnation. Martha Stewart especially has been vocal about Christian forgiveness." Grace read the letter with blurred eyes. At the bottom, Doc had added, "Your mother would be proud of the woman you've become, as are many of us who remember her gentle spirit living on in you." "Do you want to go back?" Eli asked softly. "Visit? Someday. Maybe, but not yet." She set the letter aside. "That's the past. Tell me about our future. "This land Thomas offers, what's it like?" They talked through the night, planning and dreaming. The land was challenging but beautiful, a valley with a creek, good grass, shelter from worst weather. They'd build small at first, expand as they could. Maybe take in a few cattle, plant a garden, create something lasting from honest work and shared love. "It won't be easy," Eli warned. "Frontier ranching is hard living." "You've gotten used to town comforts." "I got used to barn hay and danger," she countered. "I think I can handle honest hardship." As dawn broke, they stood together at her cabin window, watching snow fall silent on Pine Ridge. Come spring, they'd leave for their new home. She'd pack her mother's journal and medicine box, her books and hard-won wisdom. He'd bring carpenter's tools and rancher's knowledge learned at his brother's side. But for now, they had this: a quiet morning, coffee growing cold, and the simple miracle of being together without hiding. No more lies, no more sneaking through darkness. Just a man and woman who'd found each other against all odds, building a life from the ashes of who they used to be. "No regrets?" Eli asked, echoing his old question. Grace turned in his arms, thinking of her father's rigid certainty, of Mrs. Morrison's scandalized whispers, of all the proper paths she might have walked. Then she thought of her students' eager faces, of poetry shared freely, of waking beside this man without shame or fear. "Not one," she said, and meant it. Outside, the Colorado snow continued falling, covering old tracks, making all things new. Grace thought of her mother's final wish, that she find courage to choose love over duty, truth over safety, that she fly free. She had kept that promise, though the flight had taken unexpected turns, from preacher's daughter to outlaw's savior, from righteous cage to uncertain freedom. Now she stood ready for the next chapter, rancher's wife, frontier teacher, poet of wide-open spaces. Whatever came next, she'd meet it with eyes open and heart fearless. She'd saved a wounded bandit in a barn, and he'd saved her right back. Together, they'd found something worth more than gold or reputation, a love that transcended judgment, a life built on their own terms. The preacher's daughter had fled her cage. In her place stood Grace Deacon, woman of courage, keeper of stories, living proof that sometimes the most righteous path is the one that leads furthest from everything you've known. And in a small cabin on the Colorado frontier, as snow erased the past and wrote the future clean, she smiled and stepped into whatever came next, hand in hand with the man who'd taught her that salvation sometimes comes in the most unexpected forms. The end. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. We hope Grace and Eli's journey touched your heart as much as it touched ours. Where are you listening from today? Drop a comment below and let us know. We love connecting with fellow Western romance enthusiasts from around the world. Don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Campfire for more tales of frontier love, courage, and redemption. Share your thoughts about Grace and Eli's story in the comments. Did their love inspire you? What was your favorite moment? Until we meet again around the campfire, keep riding toward your own horizons. Partners.